Hello everyone. I hope that you can hear me. And just to be sure, so I won't start immediately. I'll wait for a few seconds because probably I guess it will take 1 or 2 minutes till everybody joined our session. Yeah, I hope you had a good day so far. Actually, I had a pretty good day because I think I slept for eight and a half hours today. I can't do that always, so that was a good start. Yes, for those of you who joined, I will just, I would wait a few seconds till everybody joined because I guess not everybody is going to be punctual. All right. Okay, so I think I'll just begin. Hey everyone, I'm Christian. I am, basically the initiator of Project Scagile. And originally I'm an organizational psychologist and co-founded the tool Echometer. You've probably seen it. We are basically sponsoring Project Scagile. We have thousands of users. We have a pretty big community within Agile all around the world. Maybe the statistic of, I think, roughly 50% of Agile transformations fail. And given that, we are seeing it at our customers. We were thinking, okay, we do have the network. We know people who have the knowledge to help you and to help the community to succeed in Agile transformation. And therefore, we said, okay, let's try to build up like this little learning library where people can learn from other practitioners and get to know best practices to make sure that the chances that the Agile transformation is succeeding are at least increased. That's basically the goal of Project Scagile. So a gift from Echometer from us after seeing a lot of companies already in this journey of Agile transformation. And today's session is focused on Agile metrics. I will quickly show you this screen. We probably have seen it before. I think it's on the Project Scagile website. If this would be you, if this would be your company being on this journey to transform your company into an Agile organization, there are many things, many hurdles, and many things that you can use as momentum. And today, again, we are talking about Agile metrics, thinking about, okay, how can they help to change behavior and to give this whole thing a clear direction. More on that later. Just to set the right expectations. We are not going deep and explaining how, for example, how velocity works. In Project Scagile, we always have this higher level perspective and thinking about, okay, how can we help you to succeed on an organizational level? That's our perspective. And so our question rather is, what are the right Agile metrics to transform a company, and not on team level, although that's going to be a topic too. But you will see later. Okay, so what else did I want to say? You probably guessed it. So we have many experts that we were talking to, and it's pretty much impossible getting all those together from different time zones. So this is an on-demand webinar, which means that it's pre-recorded because then it's a lot easier to share this information. And I conducted all those interviews actually in the last months, basically, to getting all those people together. The advantage of this is that there's a lot of information in a short time because we always try to take out the best pieces of the interviews. So I hope that you will like it. And that's the reason why I also recommend to take a pen now and be ready to write stuff down, because there's a lot of, I think, inspirational thoughts in here. And the last thing I wanted to say is just, we'll see us at the end. I have a little surprise for you. You will see in the end. But that's it. I guess I'll start the webinar now. Have fun, and till later.
There's so many wrong metrics. They're metrics that make a company or a team feel better about themselves. Oh, look, my velocity is 500,000 points every sprint because I just multiplied my points by 100,000. And those metrics really don't help.
For a long time, I couldn't even convince myself what kind of metrics I want to really capture.
This episode of Project Scagile really is about the question, what are the very few good agile metrics?
Don't measure everything. You're wasting your time.
Metrics bear the risk that you moving into a direction where you only improve the metric and not what you're trying to actually achieve. So whenever you have those intermediate metrics, you have to be very careful. If you say, hey, let's increase our velocity so our product gets marketed faster, you might only increase your velocity and not your marketing of the product because, well, then teams will start having more velocity, not by actually being faster, but by estimating stories higher and so on.
I can double my story points or double my velocity in 6 weeks if you want for any team without doing anything other than, changing what a story point means. So I think we have to be very cautious when we do things like that.
There's so many wrong metrics, and I generally refer to them as vanity metrics.
The way that we measure like velocity, you hear vanity metrics. Even cycle time can be tricky, right? Because you're not sure, like, am I measuring something of value, right?
Don't calculate time because idea is the most critical. To reach a good idea, you can take years.
So as you can see, we have some pretty strong opinions on these so-called vanity metrics. And vanity metrics basically are all the metrics out there that are based on story points, which are based on, subjective estimates of time. I know of a team that uses, t-shirt sizes instead of story points, which I like because it emphasizes that, it's like a pretty random metric in the end. And at the same time, Maureen has a point.
It's hard to avoid sometimes those vanity metrics.
So the question remains, everybody knows velocity. What should you do with those metrics then?
So when we think about it, there's a couple of different types of metrics. I believe an Agile coach or a Scrum Master should keep their own metrics for themselves and for the team. All right. When we think about velocity, those should be team metrics. And when we start sharing things like that with leadership, it ends up being comparing one team to another. And that's just not going to be good because everybody will then start fudging their estimates.
Number of user stories, story points, and things like that. They are really I would say, for team and the Scrum Masters. It's like more granular and more short term. You can basically monitor it in every sprint, how your team is progressing, whether you will hit your objectives or not.
So to summarize what we just heard, metrics trigger behavior. That's the reason why they are so interesting and powerful, and at the same time, in case of vanity metrics, dangerous. All those time-based metrics, they can be helpful, but if you use them, only use them short-term and keep them on team level. Never compare them with other teams.
But at a higher level, there are things that we might want to share out. What about the number of work items that we push through, that the team pushes through? So then, I'm told, well, teams will make those work items smaller. So that will increase their throughput that way. Like, well, but isn't that a good habit? Isn't that one of the things that we want to teach teams to do, is to make smaller work items so you can complete them faster, so you can pivot sooner, so you lower risk each time you get something done? So if we think about metrics and we think about behaviors that we want to instill as well as measure, then I think we're in a much better place.
This is really a key thing to understand. If you want to be smart regarding agile metrics, you just align them to your goals, to your current goals, to your roadmap. In psychology, there is a thing called Hawthorne effect, which basically means if people know they are observed, they somehow adapt their behavior. And you can use this to your advantage because if you measure something, people will automatically optimize this metric. Steve gives some more nice examples of how you can use that.
When we think about the program, we think about the larger group, we think about what's being funded. How do we measure the success of 100 people that we just went through? That's when it becomes critical that you have that roadmap, that you have that goal and that vision, because you want to measure your success towards that goal and that mission. What is the problem that you're solving? If the problem is quality, are defects going down? Are we finding defects sooner? If it's an issue because we were recently in the newspaper because of security related problems, well, are we closing some of those security holes? Are we getting security involved more often? Are we increasing our knowledge of security in the development teams sooner than later? Or maybe, what we want to do is we want to, increase our market share. Maybe we want to improve our net promoter score. But think about what those goals are and make your metrics align towards the goals. Otherwise, what are you measuring?
So you may ask yourself now, what is our core reason? What is our goal with our agile transformation? And from my experience, a nice example that illustrates the core reason is the Blockbuster case study. So to very quickly summarize it for you, Netflix started a lot later than Blockbuster, but still they were able to align around their customers. So they started with a DVD rental service and then went to a subscription model and then went to an IT company basically, always rethinking, okay, what is the best way that we can serve to our customer? How can we align around customer value? Maybe you saw the webinar already. And as you can see in this nice graphic here, by doing that, they were able to again and again jump the curve and beat their competition. I guess that's what most organizations want. So if we take this as an example, we may now ask ourselves, okay, what is the core reason for our agile transformation? If we would do the 3 whys for our agile transformation, we would ask, okay, why are we doing this? Because we want to be productive and efficient even in times of uncertainty like COVID, for example. Why? Because we want to deliver the most amount of value in the shortest amount of time. Why? Because we want to be successful as a business long term, like Netflix, is doing until today at least. What I personally liked here is the question, okay, how do we get this future customer value? That's what we need to be this Netflix. I think you need 2 preconditions in this equation. I call it the agile metrics formula. You need on the one hand the culture to be innovative, to have the ideas to be successful in the future, and you need agility to deliver your ideas fast. That's the 2 things that you have to work on to be this successful company in the future. Now the question remains, okay, if we have these 2 things, culture and agility, what are specific metrics that you can use to improve those?
But for me, there's really about 4 metrics I consider to be the most critical. One is predictability. And I'm going to say this. Why predictability? It's built on the value of trust. If I can't be predictable, if I tell you, hey, Christian, next Friday, I'm going to call you. And if I don't do that, are you going to trust me? You're not. You're not going to have that trust in me. You're not going to depend on me. You're not going to think highly, and we're not going to have that same respect. So for me, predictability is critical. Do what we say we're going to do. If we're going to commit, we're going to commit to do what we can. And if we're not going to be able to do what we can, we're going to have that strong communication together between you and I so that I can ensure that you and I maintain this trust. So trust.
The site has the program predictability measurement. That's a really good one to use.
Program predictability is a huge sell. If you started off at a previous company I was at, we were delivering maybe 30 to 40%, of our commitments. So when we started implementing scaled agile frameworks and things like that, we went to 80% and then 90% program predictability. And that is a huge win because then departments in the organization saw, wow, they are 90% predictable. What they commit to, they deliver 90% of the time. How do we get that? How do we change what we're doing? Because what we're doing isn't working.
So predictability is a good measure because of 2 reasons. Firstly, it creates trust, which is obviously really important, especially in the beginning of agile transformation. And on the other hand, it can also help to sell agile internally because it shows relatively objective, okay, it is worth it. We are more predictable than before. The thing is, with predictability on its own, you have to be careful, as John is pretty nicely explaining.
Depending on the way that the organization is managed, there's 2 what I call hero metrics that I look at. The first one is predictability based on value. And the key indicator there, or the key question to answer, is where in the organization are we delivering value? For some organizations, that's at the story level. For other organizations, that could be at a feature or even an epic level. Whatever level that is in your organization, that's where you should be measuring predictability based on value. Are we predictable at delivering value to our customer, right? So you can see here, it's all linked together. And if you're not doing the work at that executive team level to identify the operational value streams and the value to the customer, these other metrics won't make a lot of sense or won't give you the information that you're looking for.
So I guess John has a point. If you are predictable at delivering crap, that doesn't help. It somehow has to be connected to delivering value. And by the way, I highly recommend to watch our webinar on aligning around value, which is strongly connected to this. Looking at the Agile metrics formula we talked about, it's pretty obvious that, future customer value is not enough. We also have to look at the current value that we deliver to survive short term. So what we have to do is to measure the current value that we are delivering.
So whenever you can measure value delivery, I would start with that.
Don't calculate time. Measure the value we are delivering every site. Maybe we've been working for like a quarter, but the value is nothing. So you fail.
If I could only measure one thing, then I would clearly go with the performance of my product. For me, this is the one metric to have an eye on. As I mentioned before, you can create your user stories to only aim on this central KPI, improve our product. The reason why I consider it an agile metric is it fosters the agile values. It's about value contribution, everybody knowing what is my contribution to that? What role do I play here? If you enable everybody to see what his or her change has improved the overall product performance, then this is a very empowering, very inclusive metric to have. So if you only measure the performance of your product, the worst thing you might end up with is a really good product.
For me, the next one is quality. Why quality? Because, well, to be honestly, there's a lot of stuff out there that's crap. And the thing is, if you want to piss off your customers, deliver something that doesn't have value. That's what you can do to piss off your customers, or doesn't work, or they lose their investment, they lose their money, they are unable to process something. If you make it painful for them, they're going to make it painful for you.
So they may be using different words here, like quality or product, but what they basically mean is value, and that's definitely the word we heard most often with all of the interviews. If you would measure one thing theoretically, it should be somehow value. And on organizational level, you can go even one step further.
Metrics was it was an interesting topic. For a long time, I couldn't even convince myself, what kind of metrics I want to really capture. But what we eventually ended up using, one is basically the business value, which is prescribed by SAFe. It basically means that you have all the work which is being done. What is the value which eventually has been delivered to the business?
A lot of times, if you can get business value established and you start off with that baseline, here's what we're delivering right now. And then as you start implementing, you can show how you're delivering more business value.
Value to the business. So if I'm working on something, if you don't see it as the same value, you're the business leader here. If you don't see it as valuable, then why am I working on it?
That is the best measure I've found, because it forces people to come to the table and talk to one another, listen to one another. They wouldn't do that otherwise.
So try to measure value to the business, because it really helps to foster communication between the business and dev part within your organization. John is even more specific about this metric.
The second metric that I like is referred to as CPI, SPI, cost performance index and schedule performance index, both a part of the Agile earned value. Earned value management, once again, is a very old school, so to speak, metric that came from manufacturing. And why earned value makes sense for Agile organizations is, especially for a transformation, is oftentimes the executive leadership is looking at the investment that they're putting into developing these products. And the only way that you're going to understand what your investment is by looking at the earned value. So earned value will tell you, for every dollar that I'm spending, am I getting the cost or the schedule, the value that I'm expecting from that dollar out? And once again, earned value is done at where that value is being delivered. So once again, understanding the importance of, are we delivering that value at a story level? If we are, that's where we're measuring earned value. If it's at the feature or epic level, we're measuring earned value at those appropriate levels. But as an organization that's making investments into developing product or making investments into an agile transformation, earned value management will show them the value that they're getting for that investment.
Well, it may be old, but it still could be gold. So I really like this perspective of John. But what you have to keep in mind here is Vivek's perspective.
It does require a lot of change leadership to get this concept across of business value. It's a little bit hard to get it, especially first time or for a long time, I would say. Right? When you start asking this question from business and you have, let's say, 5 business partners sitting in the room, and now they have to reconcile the business value. So they are coming from their background, right? For them, their request is important. So everybody will tend to think that I know about my request. What do I know about other requests? But that's the point, right? That even if you are business partner number 1 and there are 5 business partners in the room, you listen to other business partners, try to understand what they are doing, what is the value it is delivering to the company, and then align. So there is an effort involved there in having business come to the terms with that and understand it and then give that. But once they do that, it works very nicely.
So keep in mind that this metric, business value, does require a change within your organization. A more practical value that is strongly correlated to value is this one.
I would consider like NPS scores from your customers, because I mean, everything you're doing is for your customers. Like, are they more satisfied?
Which leads to customer desire. Net promoter. Or what you're delivering, that journey map, going back to the journey map, what you're delivering, does that actually really meet the pain points? Are our customers emotionally feeling better about the process they're going through? Or are they like, if the competitor was $5 cheaper, I would leave?
So in my opinion, it doesn't have to be NPS, it doesn't have to be Net Promoter Score, but somehow measuring customer satisfaction really makes sense. I personally like this top box customer satisfaction metric. As we know, we also have this culture within our Agile metrics formula. So the question is, how about cultural metrics?
Cultural metrics, I think, are a huge point, and they're often overlooked.
Also, any kind of satisfaction surveys, right? Employee engagement, because at the end of the day, happier employees are more productive employees.
You know, when teams are happier, they're generally producing more, they're more productive. You see it within their interactions, they're communicating more, they're talking more, they're able to read their coworkers better instead of, you know, as like a scrum master, instead of having them to like chase people down, people are coming to him or her with issues, right? So you start to see it in an organization.
Folkman has done some amazing work with cultural metrics and came to the conclusion that organizations in the 80 percentile or 90 percentile of engagement, or empowerment, have employees that are far more engaged than those in the lower 20 or 30% of how it's measured. So if you have people that are involved with everything through the process, that understand what their work is doing and why it's important, they will be far more engaged.
Ultimately, yeah, it's very much of value to understand where the team is at. It still is an art when you're trying to measure, basically what we're talking about is maturity, team maturity.
So as we can see, cultural metrics do offer huge potential. But I agree with Greg that it's not easy. It's not an art, but it is a science to measure them. Before we go deeper, let's first check maybe what agile cultural metrics are used by practitioners.
I worked on a metrics paper a while ago, and I kind of put the metrics into 4 buckets, and one of the 4 kind of speaks to what you're talking about. I called that particular bucket collaboration metrics. So I think one way to look at that would be to get some visibility into what some people refer to as team satisfaction.
Happiness is a great cultural metric. It is subjective, but when you're reflecting back, on a sprint, on a quarter, a year, or even a previous transformation, it's good to kind of baseline how people feel about that particular effort.
And engagement, I believe they measured engagement by understanding, will people go the extra mile? Will they, speak up more commonly when they see an issue? Because you only get one chance to shoot the messenger. If somebody brings you an issue and you shoot them down or beat them up over it, well, guess what? The issues will still continue. You just won't hear about them. So, will people work, on weekends or evenings when absolutely necessary? And people are far more likely to when they feel engaged and empowered. So we want to make sure that happens. So that is worth measuring.
Another cultural metric that I like, I refer to as ROTI, return on time invested. So whenever I'm having a meeting or pulling folks together, I want to make sure that they're happy, that they're satisfied with the time that they invested into my meeting or my workshop that I'm hosting.
You can also you can ask HR, how is the attrition? How many people are leaving the company versus, before we started this, when people were just getting burned out.
Okay, so we have satisfaction, engagement, happiness, ROTI and attrition. To make it short, on organizational level, I wouldn't go for happiness. Why? Because from a scientific perspective, the quality criteria, reliability, objectivity and validity, they simply don't apply to this psychological construct. Whereas for satisfaction and engagement, they both are validated surveys that you can use. So I would recommend to use those. And possibly, as Sean is saying, I recommend to combine it with hard data like attrition. That would be great. And also obviously ROTI is a really nice score, which also adds more power to the quality of your metrics. Another possibility, probably like an add-on on this, would be to use models to get a more holistic view on your agile transformation. For example, like the Spotify health check.
There's one by Spotify too called the team health check, which a lot of people find useful. So for instance, one of the things about the team health check that is helpful is what you often see is you anonymize it in the sense that it's not about like trying to see, employee A said this and employee B said that. It's about looking for kind of trends in the aggregate. So with the Spotify health check kind of thing, basically you run this, ideally you run this thing with multiple teams at the same time. And you do it on, ideally some kind of regular cadence, maybe once a quarter or whatever it is. And then, it basically has a red, green, yellow type of pattern to it. So for instance, if let's say there's problems with environments that you see multiple teams are reporting that's really causing them problems, which would be a red, that's a really strong signal to the leadership team that, hey, we probably need to take some action on this. If we address this issue, our teams are going to be happier and they're going to deliver better. So, so I think those are examples of things we can do.
So to summarize, it gives you trends and it also helps to put down action items, which is obviously great. But at the same time, in agile transformation, you should really think about what you are culturally measuring. And I'm not sure if like a predefined model is the right one, as Kevin is explaining.
When it comes to measuring culture, what I learned from a talk by Simon Sargmeister about business culture design is that you should always map your current culture towards the culture that is needed to participate in the market you want to participate in. Sometimes there are big gaps. Perhaps your culture does not include a lot of innovation. The sense to innovate might not be very strong in your company. But then on the other hand, you are trying to create a product that is top-notch innovative. You have to, well, at least recognize this gap and then create cultural initiatives to close that gap. That can be a long journey. If you take a look at how companies are representing themselves in advertisement, for example, very often what you see there is not only a message to the customers, but also a message to the employees. This is what we want to become. This is the kind of company that we want to be, and this is a step into this cultural change. In the beginning of such an advertisement, some employees might say, I don't see myself being part of that. That's not us. And then you ask them again 1 year later, and perhaps they say, yeah, I can identify with that. That's our company.
So again, metrics should be highly aligned to your goals, even culturally. So firstly, you have to really think through what kind of culture do we want to have. And secondly, you can think about regularly measuring this to use the Hawthorne effect basically and make people think about, for example, are we innovative, if that would be one of your agile metrics. You know, at least they are thinking about it and regularly nudge to think about, okay, this is the culture that we want to have apparently. And as you heard, you may be even thinking about talking to marketing to talk about, okay, emotionally, what would it feel like to have this culture? But there are definitely things that we have to be careful with. These are some common mistakes that we heard about.
It does involve some science, but it is somewhat of an art, because what questions are you asking? How are you asking them?
Most surveys, however, do a really poor job of that, because most surveys are designed to give you that, that high score. So we have to be careful in the way that those questions are asked. And I can provide you some examples, but look up Folkman's work would be a great place to start.
Some of my experience using a happiness metrics is it's very much a lagging indicator, right? Where when we're looking at happiness, it's somebody's reflection, and there's a lot of outside potential influence on that, right? Something that's happening in their personal life, something that happened on their way to work, could potentially impact the way that they're filtering what's happening at work.
That is a really interesting and important point. Metrics often are the output of many other things, which is the reason why I recommend to measure these outputs like attrition or engagement, but also the psychological preconditions of these outputs. If you think about it, that's exactly the rationale of the 5 Scrum values. Focus or openness, those are the preconditions of innovation. I know that many Scrum Masters do talk about these things within their retrospectives, and I totally recommend to do so, and also thinking about measuring them regularly. So thereby, using those preconditions, increasing the maturity level of the team step by step. That's actually exactly, by the way, what echometer is doing. We're giving Scrum Masters 3 outputs: loyalty, engagement, and innovation. And on the other hand, we're giving Scrum Masters the preconditions of those. And when I say preconditions, I mean that we are giving them very specific phrases, things and behaviors that they can perfectly use within their retrospectives to make teams reflect. For example, when you look at this phrase from echometer, it kind of implies already the action item, and it just uses the Hawthorne effect to shape culture. If you want to learn more about our psychological model, we also have a free ebook that you can download within Project Scagile. What's important to add here is that you have to be very careful with surveys because of the following.
Be careful because you can over-survey. So that happens a lot. So I've seen that where some companies go, we're going to do a survey every week, and people get survey exhaustion.
I've seen surveys that are 60 questions that take 2 to 4 hours to complete. That's not the type of survey that we're looking for. Just very simple, I'd say, 3 to 5 questions max, and just very poignant.
I would say the short survey is better and more often. SurveyMonkey makes it really easy to send out a 5-question survey. How happy am I personally about this change? How well does it benefit my group? How well does it benefit the customers? If there's one thing you would keep, what would it be? If there's one thing that you would throw away, what would it be? Make it short, right? But add a few open-ended questions so that you can start getting more feedback.
So you heard it. Don't over-survey, rather use less metrics and use them more often. And also you may think about using open questions. One thing that is really important regarding not only cultural but all of your metrics is think about the process of what you are doing with these metrics. One word that we heard pretty often in the context of metrics is this one.
I could hear them in the retrospectives.
For discussion during retrospectives.
The retrospective.
Okay, what are the metrics, right, that we're using, and how do we make sure that we get retrospectives on a regular cadence?
So to avoid this feeling of over-surveying, it's really important to regularly talk about what you measured and make sure that you implement action items around them. Agile retrospectives are the perfect event for this. For example, you could regularly talk about, the 5 Agile Scrum values, also measure them, and then have this perfect feedback for the Scrum Masters to see step by step Okay, are we really developing? Is our maturity level increasing? That's exactly the rationale of echometer, by the way. But, you know, again, this doesn't only apply to the cultural metrics, but this applies to all metrics.
Ultimately, the struggle, I think, with metrics, again, with the leaders, they're used to PMO type things that you've got a Gantt chart that says, oh, here, look, on March 15th, I get this thing. And I get on March 30th, I get this thing. And they're just looking at delivery dates. And it kind of lines up with Wall Street reporting or something, I guess. I don't know. One of the things that I think SAFE has done well with their 5.0 is recognize that this is always going to exist for now, and we need to find a way to work with it. And so they talk about the concept of the dual operating system. You can have that PMO and they can do that stuff. You just got to teach them that, you know, they're like at the portfolio management level. We're down here doing the work at this level. How do we sync up our metrics, what we're delivering, and our timelines with what you want?
You really don't need many metrics, but what you need is a follow-up process for all the metrics, a process. What are you going to do with them? How do you sync them up? Are you going to talk about them in the PI planning, in the retro of retros, wherever? But you need a process here. The dual operating system is a really nice metaphor in this context.
So how do you get leadership to understand that here's what our metrics are, here's what we're delivering? You have to have that dual operating system, somebody in between. It'd be better, I think, if a product owner rather than a project manager, a product owner was the one who's communicating with the customers and saying, all right, here's the features list that you guys want. Here's at the top. Here's what we're knocking off first. Here's our progress. You can see the other one, relative size to that one. This one takes this long. You could probably guess it's going to be about that long. We don't know, but if we get in there and find something crazy, you're still doing the same work. You're still having the same problems that we had when we were just doing waterfall, but you have the customer, or, you know, the customer, your leadership are engaged in it now with you, and they're seeing the progress.
So to summarize the key points of what you've just seen, think about your goals. Really think about how can you support reaching your goals through setting the right metrics. And your roadmap can be a really good starting point to find the right goals. You can find more on goals in our first webinar on starting to scale. And then the other thing is have a process that integrates all the relevant stakeholders into what are you going to do with the metrics? Why do you measure them? And given that, I really recommend to have a look at our webinar on the most important event in Agile that will also heavily help you to shape your transformation.
If you're not doing retrospectives, you're not doing Agile.
Retrospectives are so important because, yes, even if you're delivering value at 90%, nobody's perfect. How can we improve?
There's no better place for everyone to learn and also for you to prove that you can change your circumstances, that you are in the driver's seat of the change.
Well, at Echometer, we analyzed thousands of retrospectives. And what can I say? They are just the best way, hands-on, to shape organizational culture.
The retrospective is the key ceremony of Scrum. It also, I believe, is the most misused ceremony in Scrum.
All right, that was it. I really hope that you liked it. You should be able to give us a quick feedback now on the right side of your screen. Just one question, one click. It would be really helpful if you just, give us your first perception, how you liked it. And then I think I talked about a surprise. Would you like to talk to somebody else, to another company, another organization that is in a very similar situation than you are, or maybe a little more mature? Because that's what we are offering you. If you are interested in that, because, we have this big community. We have thousands of users and many customers, as you can also see here in the screen. And, imagine you could, save some of the experiments within your Agile transformation because others did it before. I guess that could save you a lot of time. And that's the idea of this. So yeah, if you want to talk to somebody else, you just have to book a 15-minute call with us. And then we'll quickly assess, okay, what is your maturity level? Where are you at the moment? And then we'll think about, okay, whom can we match you to within our network, within our community? The thing is, there's always 3 spots available for every webinar. So yeah, first booked, first serve. You should be fast if you are interested in that. You can book it. I think there should be a button at the bottom of the screen, bottom left, and also you'll be automatically redirected to the page where you can book this quick call with us. Yeah, if you're interested, be sure to be fast. Thanks so much for attending, and I hope that we can see you in the next webinars, who are also really interesting and I think really helpful, at least if you are in an agile transformation. Yeah, have a great day, and maybe we'll see us in a quick community call. Bye bye.